Well, good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Lessons of Vietnam. Tonight's show will be a grunt part two, or why your father or grandfather didn't want to talk about it. The last show we talked about things that a grunt went through. We can continue on talking about the life of a grunt in Vietnam. Of course, there was about it takes 10 soldiers to keep a grunt out in the field. Supply, cooks, administration, a little bit of everything. Um, Basically, we'll call rear echelon people. And so we're going to talk a little bit about them also tonight. And as you remember from last time, I showed you where one of the buildings were hit by a 122 millimeter rocket in one of the safe areas. So there really wasn't a whole lot of safe areas, but let's get the show started here. I want to tell you all about the information here. I am your host, Bill Dixon, Vietnam veteran 67 and 68. It was a good time to be not in Vietnam, going to Tet Offensive. We'll broadcast courtesy of Nissan Communications in the Raleigh headquarters here. If you have any comments or questions, there's my email. Contact me at dixonbill80@yahoo.com. And of course, as always, to participate during the show, make a comment, ask a question or whatever, is dial 919-518-9773. Or even better, come in on Skype at Computers 2K Voice. Either one of those will put you on the air with us, and we can talk about what we've talked about or anything else you want to talk about. Hopefully, it goes along with with Vietnam. As always, we're trying to eliminate those 22 a day that say they can't go on any farther. So there's the Veterans Crisis Line. If you're a veteran or you know a veteran who's having trouble, please reach out and dial the number 1-800-273-8255 and press 1 and talk to somebody. Talk to somebody that's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, saw the movie, all that sort of stuff. You know who you're talking to. Okay, now let's get right on into the show. Just want to go back and recap a little bit some of the wonderful things that you could come across when you were in Vietnam. A few of the snakes. You can see that little one down there they're pulling. That was a little bigger than the one I saw. The biggest one I saw was only 14 feet. The little green snake, we called him two-step because he bit you and you had about 2 steps. And I'm really glad I didn't see the top two on the right, the cobra or the black one, because they were pretty poisonous too. So that was some of the things. And let's talk. And then we got the ants and the spiders and so forth. And you see the guy with a hat on holding the little spider over there. And that big blue one right there, he just looked bad just because he's blue. And anthills. And of course, the mosquitoes and other stuff. There's your millipede. As you can see, just like the one you got at home, except he's a little bit bigger. And I'm not certain what the one in the middle there is. I never saw him. I can't figure out if he's a lobster or what he is, but he's supposed to be a bug. And of course, you can see the guy beating off the mosquitoes over there. I think they all had tail numbers like the airplanes, but the mosquitoes were bad. And of course, walking along and taking a nice walk through the jungles and every day and through the swamps. And as you can see, there's a guy in that picture, that little picture on your right. There's a guy in there standing. I know you can see him. That was kind of like going to look for the bad guys. He could be standing right there and you don't see him. And that guy's a lot taller. He is almost dead center in the picture. There's a little bit of a dark spot right there, and that's him standing in there. So that kind of gives you an idea what it's like. And again, who's the bad guys? They told me when I got there, when I asked, how do you tell the good guys and the bad guys, that if they were pointing a rifle at you, they were probably bad guys. But then there were other people who could have been bad guys. Is that lady that guy's carrying across the rice paddy there? Probably not, but I know the one in the middle is. She's a Viet Cong. And those 2 kids, which side are they fighting on today? Both of them have AK-47s, but the one of them has an American hat on, and they're probably smoking American cigarettes. And then there's the man down at the bottom with his family on the motorcycle. I'm surprised he didn't have a turkey or a pig or something on there with him and his family. He's only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus him on the bike. There's a young lady getting help at the Medicap. So how do you know which one of those are the bad guys? You don't. Now, let's talk about another problem that the grunts had. It's called the rules of engagement. It was nice when you go off to war if you got a balanced scale, but if it's out of balance like this one is, it's kind of hard to do anything. So the American grunt, the rules of engagement. Into the rules of engagement, co-authored by Secretary of State Dean Rusk and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. That alone should give you goosebumps. Because McNamara did everything about computer and whatever analysis he came up with. These rules ensured that we could not win and the communists could not lose. Understand that they were kept secret for 20 years. They were locked up, 28 pages of them locked up so nobody could see them that might have a power to do something. It took a subpoena and a lot of arm twisting from Senator Barry Goldwater to finally have these rules of engagement hauled out of the State Department's vaults, declassified and published in the congressional record for all the world to see, a decade after the war was over. A little late to do anything about it 10 years later. Also included in this no-win strategy was the on-again and off-again ordering of ammunition quotas. Now, you're in a war and you got an ammunition quotas, which halted attacks and reversed victories when an elusive daily quota had been met, with paradoxically abandoning the policy on other days, ordering vast quantities of ammunition to be fired at undefined targets. Some days you could be in a battle and you shot up all the ammunition you're supposed to use that day, so you have to pull out and the battle stops. And other days you just have a mad minute. You just go over on the perimeter where you are and open up and just shoot. It's called a mad minute. And you just, if there's anybody out there, you're going to get them because everybody just shoots out there at the same time, basically the same direction. So one day you got to be careful how many bullets you use, and other days they want you to go out there and shoot a whole bunch up. I'm not certain who decided what was when. I guess McNamara did it. Quite a series of misjudgments. The commander-in-chief, Lyndon Baines Johnson, added one more. By one stroke of his pen, he single-handedly reversed U.S. trade policy, authorizing the wartime sale of U.S. non-military hardware to the East European Communist bloc nations, who unsurprisingly converted the same into military hardware, which was then shipped to North Vietnam, sporting labels, made in the USA. Those made in the USA weapons killed American boys. Anybody never thought that you sell to these people, and these people are going to sell to those people, and those people are the ones that are shooting at us? I guess they never considered that they would not sell it to somebody else and make profit themselves. Okay, rules of engagement. Who, where, when, and what direction, what time, with what can the American military strike at the enemy? The picture there is a typical Michelin plantation, rubber trees. You can see that little bit of red there. That's a cup where they notch the tree and pull the sap out. When Americans' planes were flying over North Vietnam, if they saw a sound missile site under construction, they were not allowed to bomb it. You would think that would be a good time to do it before it shoots at you. The reason they didn't want you to bomb it because there might be a Chinese or Russian advisor down there and they might get killed. Okay, that was their thinking. They didn't want Russia or China to come into the war. Of course, they were already in the war, just like we were. But anyway, when American planes were flying over North Vietnam and saw a communist MiG plane on the ground, they could not attack it. It had to wait till it was in the air for the same reason as above. There might be a Chinese or Russian advisor there, and sometimes I think the Russian and Chinese might have been flying the airplane. If the Americans were shot out while patrolling in the rubber plantations, they could not shoot back without asking permission from the command, who would need to ask South Vietnamese command whether you shoot back again, because if you shoot back, it might hit a tree and some of the sap would run out. Okay. Now, this explains the ground war rules of engagement by a group called Vietnam Veterans for Factual History. It's a group of Vietnam veterans. We've had some of them. We had one of them on quite a few times. That's Del Vecchio. Has been on, but his group has put together factual information. Let's see here. Number one, commanders in direct contact with the enemy in uninhabited areas could request direct artillery fire without prior authorization. In other words, after the open arms program, or not the open arms, but after the program we talked about last time where they take the Vietnamese people and move them to another location, now this is a free fire zone. If that place is considered a free fire zone and there's nobody there, supposedly, because you move the villages, of course, they had the tendency to come back, then you could shoot a bomb, whatever you wanted to, without waiting for authorization, because that was a free fire zone. Commanders in direct contact with the enemy in inhabited areas could only authorize direct fire if their mission was in jeopardy and the enemy was possibly identified and only for defensive purposes. In other words, if they ain't shooting at you, you can't shoot back at them. Area, okay. Sometimes I wonder just how many times that these rules were followed. Because if I was in the field and they were shooting at me, and then they stopped shooting, I'm gonna keep right on shooting as long as I got something to shoot with. Indirect fire could only be utilized after approval of the province chief for the province where the fire would be directed. Okay, and in other words, if you were going to have the artillery pieces or the airplanes to come in and drop bombs or shoot artillery or so forth, you had to ask for permission from the province chief in that area, and he may or may not get back to you today. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, or maybe not at all. No artillery could be fired in areas where friendly troops were not operating without the prior use of leaflets or loudspeakers, even if enemy fire was received from the area. So before you could shoot back, you had to supposed to go in there with loudspeakers and tell them, hey, we're coming, we're going to shoot. You might want to leave. And that's kind of against the whole rules of war. I thought the whole rules of war is to kill the bad guys so the good guys can live. I thought that was what it was.
Surprising.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Direct fire against enemy forces that were not in direct contact in inhabited areas required approval of both the province chief and the battalion commander. So now you had to get permission from yours plus the province chief. How did you think about fighting a war like this? You know, talking about one hand tied behind your back. I think you almost got both of them tied behind your back. Let's see what else we got here. Number 6, indirect fire missions in inhabited areas require the approval of the province chief, the battalion commander, and the dropping of leaflets or the use of loudspeakers to warn civilians prior to commencement. So supposedly you had to go in there and let everybody know that you're coming in and you were going to shoot up the area. Okay. And I know the bad guys never listened to the loudspeakers or read the pamphlets, so they didn't know that you were coming in. Cordon and search missions could only be conducted with the approval of the district and village chief, as well as the U.S. commander and RVN, that's the Republic of Vietnam, advisors must accompany all missions. In other words, you had to have a Vietnamese with you at all times when you're going in. Attacks in inhabited areas required that the commander explain to the inhabitants why the action was initiated after the attack was over. In other words, after you went in and burned the village during the battle, trying to get the bad guys out, you have to go in there and explain to the villagers why you done it. Yeah. Fleeing enemy troops could not be engaged unless they were first ordered to halt and failed to obey. Then they must be fired upon with the intent to wound only by firing at the lower extremities. You got to be kidding me. Only in the movies can you shoot the gun out of a guy's hand or shoot him in the leg. Let me tell you something. M16 bullet, when it hits, it kind of starts rotating. And it makes a very big hole. It's hard to wound somebody when they're running like that and shooting back at you. And you can, how do you go? Halt, don't run, stop. Well, see, they don't speak English. So you can holler halt all you want to, and they don't have a clue what you're talking about. Okay, so maybe hollering halt wasn't a whole lot of good. Maybe that rule didn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you understood that rule didn't make a whole lot of sense. But okay, what have I got next? Okay, number 10. The much discussed free fire zones had to have prior approval from ARVN, Republic of Vietnam, political authorities, and were still restricted by all other rules of engagement. We just put in another source that you had to get permission from. That's a long line of people that you got to get permission from before you can do anything. While it's well known that Washington micromanaged the war, Thus, the famous story about LBJ boasting that the military couldn't bomb an outhouse without his approval. Now, I don't know whether he said that, but I won't there, but everybody else says he said that because you couldn't do nothing. As we talked about before, I believe we talked about the friendly village and the bad village, and the friendly village that they said in Washington might not necessarily be the friendly village. Senator Barry Goldwater was so appalled by the rules of engagement that he had them entered into the congressional record along with this statement. And this is his statement. Mr. Goldwater says this, Mr. President, I ask this because I think it is very, very necessary for the members of this body, the public, the press, and media to understand fully the restrictions that were placed upon our forces in South Vietnam. It is absolutely unbelievable that any Secretary of Defense would ever place such restrictions on our forces. It is unbelievable that any president would have allowed this to happen. I think on the reading of these restrictions, members of this body will begin to understand in a better way just what happened to the American military power in South Vietnam. As I say, it is unbelievable. I am ashamed of my country for having had people who have allowed such restrictions to have been placed upon men who were trained to fight, men who were trained to make decisions, to win wars, and men who were risking their lives. I dare say that these restrictions had as much to do with our casualties as the enemy themselves. Okay, now here's where that was his speech that was recorded and in the Library of Congress and so forth. Now, this is what I was talking about just a minute ago. As you can see, Washington there, the Capitol, the President McNamara made all the decisions on targets and non-targets. As you see that there, the nice green one right there, that's a friendly village they decided in Washington, and then the unfriendly village. But the only problem is whenever you go on patrol and you go around the unfriendly village, the children come out and bring you pineapple slices or have Cokes and so forth and wave at you and smile. But when you go over by the friendly village, every time you go over there, a guy either gets stepped on a landmine, a punji stick, or gets shot. But that's the friendly village because it was decided in Washington that was a friendly village. So you couldn't shoot back, supposedly. Okay, that was the decision, not the people on site. That was the micromanagement we talked about with McNamara and the president when he said we couldn't bomb an outhouse without his approval. And too bad he won't sit in a few of them. Freefire Zone. The planners in Washington knew little of the Vietnamese culture, which came about the problems of the Freefire Zone. A majority of the South Vietnamese population practiced Buddhism. It is very family-oriented, and most homes had a shrine for their ancestors out front. It was important to them to be near the burial sites of their ancestors. The spirit could not rest unless it was buried with their ancestors. This created a problem for the safety of the South Vietnamese and American militaries. It was decided to move entire villages to new locations. They would take up the pigs, water buffaloes, chickens, ducks, everything there, and move them to a new location. And that was where these people were supposed to be. Got this nice, wonderful house, this new place. Of course, the place they've been farming all their life and so forth, and all their ancestors are buried there. But that's okay because we got them a nice free place. Now there's nobody living in this area. It's a free fire zone. Anybody moving in this zone now is considered an enemy. But see, the people that you moved, that little village that you moved, those people didn't understand that because they all went back. When a lot of them went back, not all of them, well, a lot of them went back to where they were living before because that's where they had to be for their ancestors. But now they're considered enemy, even though they're not enemy. But that area, as you remember a while ago in the rules of engagement, that can pretty much be shot at any time, day or night, bombed anytime, day or night. And like I said, anybody moving is considered an enemy. So that kind of threw the rules of engagement and the idea of moving the civilians out of the way and so forth. So that was, I'm not certain who came up with that idea, but it didn't work very well, so forth. I guess that was another McNamaraism. In order to do this, families' personal items and livestock were moved to the site of their new home, hopefully a better home and location where they would be safer. However, so now their former home areas were vacant except for the communist troops. Now this area is designated a Freefire Zone. Anyone moving around in this area was considered an enemy, can be attacked without permission. Remember that permission a while ago? Since the villages had been emptied by moving the people to a safer location, the area was in theory wide open to bombing and attacks. In theory. Theory don't necessarily work very well if everybody don't have a copy of the theory. You know, both sides need, or maybe the enemy needs it, the American soldiers need it, and the villagers need the program so they know what they're supposed to do. This is where the problem came in. The relocated villagers with their belief in Buddhism felt they had to be near their ancestors and often sneak back into the original area. This rendered the Freefire Zone ineffective to a degree. Okay? Now, if you were a young soldier and you were over there and you were living the way we talked about with the grunts, living in the dirt and sleeping on the ground with bugs and so forth, and every day you go into this friendly village and something happens to one of your buddies, you had a tendency to get a little frustrated, as it says up there. Before Vietnam Wars had a yardstick to measure by, but not in Vietnam. In other wars, you had a line. That line took land. The more land you were able to take, the better. More land that you were kept was your measure stick on how you were doing. That's the way you fight a war. And before, you move the line and you moved up and you fought some more, and you moved up and you pushed the enemy back and so forth. In Vietnam, if you saw the morning sun, that was sometimes the only measure of success that day. In other words, you made it through the night. You got a good body count from the enemy killed the day before, but really that only means you kill more of them than they killed of you. That's a strange way to figure your success. Yesterday, you lost 3 buddies, but you killed 6 of them. So by theory, you won, but you lost 3 buddies. So how does that theory work? We take a village or a hill from the enemy, losing a couple of friends, then we leave so the enemy can come right back and reoccupy. We may get the chance to retake the place, or the higher ups may decide it is not a strategic place as it was a couple of days ago. The Hamburger Hill, Khe Sanh, all the battles were going on there, and all the soldiers were killed. We just pulled out of Khe Sanh and decided that, this really wasn't as important base as we thought it were. Even though the Marines went through 77 days of constant bombardment and attack, they decided that, Khe Sanh is not as important as we thought it was. Well, let's just go ahead and move out. What about all the men who died or wounded at a place that didn't make any difference? Would that kind of make you a little frustrated, a little angry? I don't know. You decide. How do we know whether or not we're doing any good or winning this war in this country? Well, don't know. We came under fire, but we had to ask permission to shoot back. An hour after the request was made, the request was denied. We're out on patrol. We are ambushed. After losing another friend, the enemy disappears into the jungle, not to be found. A lot of guys spent their year in Vietnam being shot at by the enemy and shooting back, but never actually seeing an enemy, because they wouldn't attack unless they outnumbered you. And then they would attack real quick and disappear into a spider hole in the ground, or just disappear in the jungle, as we saw how thick it was. And that way they were gone. And a lot of times they would take, because of their Buddhism and so forth, they would take their wounded or dead with them whenever possible, because it was necessary for them to be buried close to their family. So how do you tell whether you're winning or losing? And create a little bit, again, we're talking about that word frustration. Today we lost a new guy. Just came in. We don't even know his name. He was killed by friendly fire. An artillery round went short. A bomb exploded where it shouldn't have exploded. The guy from the airplane dropped it too late, and it came in and killed this new guy. His face is all messed up. How do we know who he is? Hope we can find his dog tags, because he'd only been here a day. How do we know who he is? We have been doing such a good job lately that we are always picked to do the crappy job. In other words, if you do a real good job, you get awarded for it. You get to do more of that good job, ambushes and guard duties and so forth, because you did a good job when you're out. So we need to send you out again. So then you had to, a lot of times after you attack, some general on the other end of the line, somewhere else, probably at Long Binh or in Saigon, and says, well, I need for you to go out there and count the bodies so we know how many, what our body count is. So then you got to supposed to have a squad to go out there and count the dead guys. The only trouble was the Vietnamese or the communists were say, they knew what we were going to do too. So it was nice of them to wait for the body count group to come out and count bodies so they could shoot them too. So a lot of times they call back in, well, we killed 20 and nobody left the wire or whatever. It just didn't make sense to go out there. Now, the mail. We've been out for 2 or 3 weeks wearing the same clothes, hadn't had a bath in 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe we're going to be at least a month before we can get a bath or whatever, unless we get rained on across the stream. And also our mail hadn't found us. The mail was not found us in 2 weeks. Been 2 weeks since we got a letter from home. My girlfriend, the last time I got the idea that she may have been talking to Jody. Now, if you don't know who that is, you have not been in the military. Doing basic training, everybody talks about Jody. He's the guy that comes and gets your girlfriend while you're gone, because he's the guy still back here while you were going off serving your country. That was Jody. The last box from home had been open before it got there. Now, sometimes you get a goodie box, but sometimes a mail clerk, not all mail clerks, because most of them were good, but once in a while you have a mail clerk that's trying to check it out, see if there's anything in the box that he liked. Okay. The shoulders the shoulder straps on our pack has rubbed our shoulders raw. We have a crotch rot and shriveled feet. That's another thing we have to put up with. The straps, you're carrying everything you own on your back, along with ammunition and so forth. And I can tell you, those straps coming across your shoulders all day long, they have a tendency to rub and gets real sore and so forth. And because you're all going, and then the crotch rot, like I said before, you don't wear underwear. Because you're always wet and you will have all kinds of rashes and so forth, and shriveled feet. That's the reason you have try to take dry socks with you. You can't get dry boots. You may not be able to change uniform, but you want to change socks every chance you get, and tie your other socks on your pack or something so it would dry during the day. But dry socks were important. And as you can see there's another leech I got there. That's a nice leech sucking some blood right there. And he's about getting full. He's going to get like a bubble right there a little bit in the jungle rot. Let's see. The leech's bites are infected and running green gunk. After a while, they start getting infected because over there, in a little cut whatsoever ends up getting infection. It's raining on us for 3 days straight, so nothing is dry. Nothing in our pack's dry. We're not dry. Everything is wet. Just another day in the jungle. We're waiting for our 364th day in a wake up to come home. That's a typical day of a grunt during the rainy season down in the Delta area. If you went a little bit farther north, up in the Central Highlands, it was a little different. It wasn't quite as wet, but during the monsoon season, it was wet everywhere. And you never got dry. Okay. Now, Vietnam vets. There's a group of Vietnam vets coming home. Vietnam vets, no yellow ribbons, no parades, no respect. Okay. Coming home to disdain, hostilities, apathy, and hatred. When American soldiers returned home from World War II in 1945, they were greeted as heroes in the United States. Cities and towns across the country held parades to honor their returning veterans and recognize the sacrifices they had made. That goes back to they went over as a unit. They came home as a unit. There's the units as they're coming down, marching down the parade. In Vietnam, most of us came home as an individual. We didn't come home with all our buddies and so forth. These guys were on a ship for 30 days or so they got a chance to be normalized as much as you can be from combat, where the Vietnam vet came home. Yesterday, he was in the jungle with the leeches and his buddy's blood all over his uniform, and the next day he's at home asking mother to pass the blankety blank potatoes, and where she gets shocked that he using such language. But the homecoming was very different for most Vietnam veterans. They came back to find the United States torn apart by debates over the Vietnam War. There were no victory parades or welcome home rallies. Instead, most Vietnam veterans returned to a society that did not seem to care about them or that seemed to view them with distrust and anger. See, while I was in Vietnam, I was married 3 years. When I was in Vietnam, I was getting the news and I was seeing all the riots and stuff all here after Martin Luther King was gone. And I was more concerned about my wife back here than I was me in Vietnam because I was seeing the news. I'm over there fighting for my country and they're back here burning it down. Done a whole lot I could do about it, but just kind of keep up and realize and say, well, I'm going to be home one of these days. And just another day. You know, as you see in the movies, it says, it don't mean nothing. What you're doing today, it don't mean nothing. It just gets you through another day because tomorrow puts you another day closer. Men who fought in World War II or Korea might be just as haunted by what they had personally seen and done in combat. Arnold R. Isaacs writes in Vietnam Shadows, the War, Its Ghost, and Its Legacy. But they did not come home as the Vietnam veterans did to a country torn and full of doubt about those wars were fought and whether they had been worthwhile, nor did the World War II or Korea military return as symbols of a great national failure. When we came home, people could not separate us from the war. They were mad about the war. So they attacked the military, the Vietnam veterans coming home because they were mad about the war and we represented the war. We were the ones over there doing bad things and losing the war, supposedly, according to the people who were doing the protesting and so forth. Some returning Vietnam veterans had trouble feeling accepted by their friends and families. Well, you could understand their friends and families. They were afraid to ask a whole lot of questions about the war. They were afraid because the veteran might just go off screaming or whatever, and because that veteran had changed a whole lot from what he had seen and gone through and so forth, as we just talked about, gone through a lot of stuff, and he's just not the same person that left. And his buddies are back, been going out and partying and so forth. And he's been out doing ambushes. So when he comes back, it's hard to fit in with those guys who've been partying every night and so forth. And even with the families. Some returning soldiers blamed their situation on the anti-war movement and developed a deep resentment towards anti-war protesters. I think most of us did when we first came back or while we're still in Vietnam. We were over there fighting and they were over there back here protesting. I think a lot of the protesters were doing it because they felt that they were doing right. But there's a lot of protesters who were out there going, hey, I'm going to protest the war because I don't want my little shiny butt to end up over there. And so after they did away with the draft, a lot of the protesters kind of slowed down, kind of give you the idea that they weren't worried about ending the war. They were worried about them being drafted and going over there because they had to stay in school and couldn't get out of school because if they dropped out of school, they were going to get their little butt over there in Vietnam. So that was one of the reasons for the war protests. Okay. Moving right along, let's see, where are we at? Okay. But other veterans began to question and actions are on their own in it. There was a group called Vietnam Veterans Against the War. It was put together by a couple of Vietnam veterans. One of them was a guy by the name of John Kerry. They actually were pretty radical there. Okay. Now, which one of those is the draft dodger? A lot of people all of a sudden got sick when they went down to the induction center. People would take aspirins to raise their blood pressure. He took drugs that raised his blood pressure. You see that in the middle. He stayed in school 12 years. He got his PhD, piled higher and deeper degree, and then he kept right on going to school because if he got out of school, he was going to go to Vietnam. He got married. Well, that might have worked for some people. It didn't work for me. He pretended to be gay. Oh, yes. I remember a guy that was went down to the induction center with me, nice looking black boy, younger than me. He was a young kid. He probably wasn't 18 or 19 years old. He had mascara and makeup on, and we had to strip down the underwear. He had on blue panties. panties now, not underwear. He had on panties, and they pulled him out of line. I don't know why they pulled him out of line, but they did. He objected to war on moral grounds and went to Canada. A lot of Americans went to Canada. They were welcome in Canada. They had a underground railroad situation, just like for slaves during the Civil War, for people going to Canada. So that was a different thing as what we saw with war protests and so forth. Now, some people who opposed American involvement in the Vietnam War treated U.S. soldiers and veterans poorly. Now, some people, that's not most people, some people, they tended to blame American troops for the tragic situation in Vietnam instead of blaming the government leaders who had sent them there. Nobody knew about the rules of engagement, pretty much. Those were the problems, but nobody knew about them, so they used the soldiers instead. Some protesters simply did not make a clear distinction between the war and those who fought it. They regarded American soldiers as ready and willing killers or ignorant dupes. Christian G. Appleby explains in his book, Working Class War, American Combat Soldiers in Vietnam. In some instances, anti-war protesters reported spitting on returning veterans and called them baby killers. Now, the baby killers came from John Kerry, giving his testimony before Congress. There's been a lot of controversy about whether people spit on or not, but they were people who would put human waste in plastic bags and throw it on you. We were told to take our uniforms off when we came home, so something was going on when we came home. Although such incidents were rare, the stories were often repeated among U.S. soldiers in Vietnam. These stories added to the soldier resentment of the anti-war movement. See, back in Vietnam, the guys who came home wrote their buddies back in Vietnam and told them about the treatment and told them how they were spit on and called names and so forth. And then the word came out was, you don't wear your uniform. So when you left that Travis Air Force Base to come home or whatever, when you left there, if there was anywhere you could find some clothes, you dumped your uniform in a trash can somewhere and came home and come out in civilian clothes. Okay. Rather than being greeted with anger and hostility, however, most Vietnam veterans received very little reaction when they returned home. They mainly noticed that people seemed uncomfortable around them and did not appear interested in hearing about their wartime experiences. I can understand that one. I came home when I was talking about a cousin of mine, and they're going, oh, well, he was in Vietnam. And what I wanted to say was, where in the hell do you think I've been for the last year? But I didn't. I just kind of let it go. But it's kind of like that, I hadn't seen you in a while. It's like, you took a 2-week vacation or a month vacation. It's been a year. God, time flies. They mainly noticed people that seemed uncomfortable around them because they knew them, the old person, not this new changed person. Society as a whole was certainly unable and unwilling to receive these men with the support and understanding they needed. Appy writes, the most common experience of rejection were not explicit acts of hostility, but quieter, sometimes more devastating forms of withdrawal, suspicion, and indifference. Okay. Even people who supported American military involvement in Vietnam did not always support the returning veterans. Some Vietnam veterans thought that the Americans who fought in early wars might be helpful than other people. So we felt with the VFWs and American Legions, hey, we can go because veterans can talk to veterans, but guess what? You see the picture there, all wrapped up in the flag. We're veterans, we're patriots, but you're not. They didn't want us because we were those crazy, drugged out baby killers who lost the war. After all, veterans of World War II, 1939, 1945, and the Korean War, 1950-53, understood what combat was like, so they'd understand how you felt and so forth and the problems. But many veterans of early wars seemed to look down on Vietnam veterans because they did not win the Vietnam War. Most veterans felt proud of their service to their country in Vietnam, yet many also had some doubts about the war and their own actions in it. In fact, some veterans protested against the war once they returned to the United States. But these anti-war veterans felt they had earned the right to question the government's policies, while the student protesters had not. They put themselves a little bit above the students out there who were protesting because they had been there, done that, bought the shirt, and probably saw the movie. So they thought they had more right, and I guess they did to a certain extent. They had more right to complain about the policies. You remember the rules of engagement situation, and so forth. For every guy who resisted the draft, one of us got to go, and he gets sent out in the boonies to get his back shot off. Veteran Steve Harper recalled after running into anti-war protesters in Chicago. One of their signs read, "We've already given enough." And I thought, what are they giving? The protesters were complaining about had given enough. And the guy coming back from Vietnam was going, well, what have they given? How many leeches have they gone through? How many swamps have they gone through? How much crotch rot and shriveled feet and so forth have they gone through? But as you see the book, all the war propaganda, all the screaming and lies and hatred come invariably from people who are not fighting. That's a quote from George Orwell. Let me read that again, because I know you don't want to miss it. All the war propaganda, all the screaming lies and hatred comes invariably from people who are not fighting, like Johnson, McNamara, and the war protesters. This is a quote from a nurse. That is not her there. It was just a picture I found of a nurse. You can see there she's got a mask on, but at the same time she's got a flak jacket and a helmet on, because she was in one of those safe areas that got hit by rockets and mortars quite a bit. So while they were operating on some wounded soldier, they may have to wear that kind of stuff just to make sure for them safety of their own. As an Army nurse returning from Vietnam in 1968, our entire plane load of veterans were held on the plane for 2 hours until it was safe for us to go into Travis Air Force Base. We were told to take our uniforms off after leaving the airport. This is from a nurse. I was also in uniform in Washington, D.C., and had eggs thrown at me by protesters. No matter that I did not agree with the war, I still deserve respect for my service. Sarah L. Bloom. That's how a returning soldier. This is one I got off Facebook, and I thought it was fantastic. Paul, I appreciate you letting me do this, even though you don't know you did, but I copied it anyway. From a Facebook posting by Paul Arca, hope that's right, Paul, on a Grunt's life in Vietnam. 45 days plus in the bush, as you would know it, out in the jungle. No shower, no clean clothes, pulling ambush at night while sleeping a few hours. So you hunt the jungle all night long, and that night you pull ambush. Eating sea rations out of a small cans. Most of the time they were cold, because you couldn't have a fire or use the C4 out of the claymores to heat sea rations. Learn to live on a few hours sleep each day. Every day is the same, searching for the enemy, and when you find him, it turns into a moment of sheer terror. When it's over, you get the wounded and KIAs killed in actions on a medical helicopter and continue your next mission. It don't mean nothing, just another day in the Nam. Then it's more of the same. Carry a 100-pound rucksack in 100-degree heat. Almost every day, someone pass out due to exhaustion. Okay. Water was a premium. When we drank out of rivers and streams, as well as bomb craters filled with monsoon rain. And I can tell you, it come out of the stream, it had everything and all kinds of creepy crawlers in it. Most of us came down with malaria and dysentery, the gift that keeps on giving. Amen to that. Then later in life came the effects of Agent Orange. We're still fighting and still dying. Most of us have the attitude, any day after Nam is a bonus day in life. Infantry units endured some of the worst conditions known to mankind. Always wet, along with sweat burning their eyes. Then there were the deadly snakes, scorpions, and mosquitoes constantly buzzing around your ears. And then there was the leeches, fire ants who loved to bite. It's like being stung by a yellow jacket. Now, this is all from a guy that was there, wrote this, what his day was like. Many were just out of high school, 18 and 19 years old. It didn't take long for them to harden to the core. You hear people always talk about the 1,000-yard stare. Okay. That's what months in the bush does to you, not to mention what it does when we went home. Some of us still carry guilt just for surviving. Remember your 3 buddies that got killed going to that friendly village? Why it was them and not you? Most of us now in our 70s, even though it might have been 50 years ago, at times it seemed like 5 minutes ago. Paul Archer, thank you for writing this piece. It's hard to explain to someone who was not there or never have experienced at war firsthand what it was like. They may try, but they will never really understand. That ought to kind of give you an idea why Papa, Grandpapa, uncles, and aunts, or whatever, didn't talk a whole lot. How do you explain what that man just said? Many Vietnam veterans built successful lives after they returned home from the war. They finished their education, established good careers, and had families. But many other veterans had a tough time readjusting to life in the United States after they completed their military service. I had the distinct feeling, common among returning veterans, I think, that this was not my country, not my time. Veteran Larry Heineman recalls in Vietnam Shadows. The cold reception the veterans got from many Americans left them feeling indifferent, or different and alone. We expected nothing in Vietnam, and when we got home, nothing's what we got. Now we have each other. We like to get together and talk and have a good time because we've been there, bought the shirt, saw the movie, read the book. Okay. In addition, many veterans went from jungles of Vietnam to their hometown so quickly they did not have time to adjust. Unlike the previous wars, when it usually took weeks for soldiers to be discharged and transported home, U.S. soldiers often returned from Vietnam within 2 days. Returning to the safety and comfort of home so quickly made it more difficult for them to make sense of the danger and misery they experienced in Vietnam. As you can see the guys up there in World War II waving, all of them coming home on a ship, and there's a soldier coming home from Vietnam. I'm guessing since the girl there is holding a baby, that's probably his wife, but could be his girlfriend. But he came home like that, and he had to adjust on his own. There were no buddies around. See, back when we come home, there was no thing as post-traumatic stress. There was nothing out there for the Vietnam veteran to get him back to a normal life. He and his family had to do it by hit and miss, trial and error. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Okay. Some veterans returned from Vietnam with severe physical disabilities or emotional problems. The Vietnam War had a much higher ratio of wounded to killed soldiers than any previous war. Faster evacuation of wounded soldiers from battlefields and advances in medical treatment meant that more men survived combat injuries, but it also meant that more veterans came home with serious crippling injuries, such as amputated limbs and paralysis. See, if you were in Vietnam and you were wounded, there weren't too many times that you had to wait before one of those crazy helicopter pilots with that big target on the front, that red cross. Those guys with nerves of steel would land that helicopter getting shot at because they were like a bullet magnet. And somebody loaded you on that helicopter, and a short time later, you're back at a hospital with nurses and doctors and so forth and pull you through. But sometimes, as it says there, you had injuries that just couldn't be fixed, but they saved your life. So you had to come home with those injuries and so forth and live with them. And so not only are you coming home to a place that don't care whether you went to Vietnam, but some of them are glad that you lost that arm or leg, that you feel like. Okay. I love this one. This is from the benefits approval officer, and he's sitting at his desk, and he says, "I've had it with all you bums coming in here for free government handouts. If you want money, go get a friggin' job." And you can see the sign there. He's working at the Veterans Administration, Department of Medical Benefits for War Veterans. And he's hollering, "Next," because he's already taken care of one veteran. They saw that veteran within 30 days, just like they tell us out there. It's gotten better, but it ain't good yet. To make matters worse, the United States government at first denied that some health problems were related to their service in Vietnam. For example, many veterans developed mental and emotional problems as they struggle to cope with the feelings about the war. They suffer from symptoms including depression, guilt, flashbacks, nightmares, mood swings, angry outbursts, anxiety, and paranoia. Doctors eventually gave this condition a name, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now the word disorder has been dropped because it's not a disorder. It's a post-traumatic stress syndrome, and recognized as a real psychological illness. But a lot of soldiers struggle out there before anybody related. No one returns unchanged. The true cost of war can only be measured by the toll it takes on the lives of our warriors. Being haunted by the sights, sounds, and smells of war does not mean they are crazy. They are not weak or broken. We must recognize that this is a normal reaction to horror no one should have to face, and understand and support our warriors. As you remember a while ago, we weren't even talking about the shooting of the bad guys, just the living conditions alone with the wildlife and the mosquitoes and the leeches and the wet and jungles and so forth. And then you add in the bad guys. Okay? Studies have estimated that as many as 800,000 Vietnam veterans suffered from PTSD. Probably just as many others had mild forms of post-traumatic stress that were not diagnosed. But the VA did not admit that post-traumatic stress existed until 1979, 6 years after the last American soldier returned from Vietnam. In addition, VA hospitals and doctors did not do well in treating veterans with post-traumatic stress because they were not ready for it themselves. Unable to find some relief from the physical pain and mental anguish, some Vietnam veterans decided to end their own lives. In fact, some experts believe that the number of veterans who committed suicides after returning home from Vietnam War is at least as great as the 58,000 Americans who died in the war. I've heard people say they could build another wall just for the people who couldn't handle it and took their own lives. I don't know whether that's that many, but there's a lot of them out there who just could not handle and had no help whatsoever. Many veterans also had trouble earning money and supporting themselves upon returning to the United States. Following World War II, the U.S. government had established a generous benefit program for veterans. This program paid for veterans' living expenses, plus offered them full college tuition. But the government was not so generous with Vietnam veterans. As it turned out, about 250,000 Vietnam veterans were unable to find jobs with their military service ended. See, when you go and take your resume in for a job, you want to be truthful. But quite often, if they saw you were a Vietnam vet, automatically they went to drugs, alcohol, post-traumatic stress. I'm sorry, sir, but we've filled the job. You're overqualified for it, but we have someone else because they weren't in Vietnam. They ain't going to say that, but that's what happened. Okay. After returning to the United States, many veterans continued to support American military involvement in Vietnam. Even though they had not accomplished all the U.S. goals, they still felt proud of their service to their country. They believed they had done their duty and fought bravely for a good cause. They blame Americans' political and military leaders for not coming up with strategy that would allow them to win, or the American public for lack of support. Going back again to the rules of engagement. But some other veterans developed some grave doubts about the war and their own actions as soldiers. They questioned the reason for U.S. involvement in Vietnam, and they felt deep regret about the death and destruction the war had caused the Vietnamese people. Such doubts were very hard on veterans because they made it seem as if their sacrifice in Vietnam had been meaningless. It don't mean nothing, remember? Just another day in the Nam. Okay? As waves of Vietnam veterans returned home in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the nation was locked in a bitter debate about the war. But see, we were not only in a bitter debate about the war, we were in a bitter debate about women's rights, civil rights, our music, rock and roll, how obscene it was. Everything, just about everything. Make love, not war. Kind of like that one. That's the reason war protesters. Women were burning their bras. All kinds of things were going on The heated arguments within the United States over military involvement in Vietnam kept most people from welcoming the veterans or recognizing their service. Ignoring the Vietnam vet was just one part of the more general phenomenon of ignoring the nation's entire shattering, unhappy Vietnam experience in all of its aspects. David Leary writes in Debates Over Vietnam. And Max Cleland, for those of you out there who don't know Max Cleland, he's a politician, but he's a Vietnam vet who lost both legs in Vietnam. He's the veteran that Joe Biden told to stand up. All y'all stand up at a speech one time. He says, within the soul of each Vietnam veteran, there is probably something that says, bad war, good soldier. Only now are Americans beginning to separate the war from the warrior. And he paid the price. Confronted with reactions of indifference, fear, or anger, some veterans kept their wartime experiences to themselves. They refused to discuss Vietnam with anyone but other veterans because no one else seemed to understand or care. There has really never been anyone who asked me, what happened to you over there? What was it like? It's like having a whole year of your life that didn't exist, veteran Jamie Bryant told Isaacs in Vietnam Shadows. When you first get back, you don't think about it much. Then you begin to wonder why no one asked these questions. Then you begin to feel like maybe it isn't something you should talk about. I think sometimes family was afraid to ask. It wasn't they were not interested. Some of them were just afraid to ask. But it didn't make any difference to the veteran because they wondered, even though they didn't know how to explain it, why nobody asked. Now, also we brought back with us the lasting effects of defoliants in Vietnam, the longest and deadliest battle in history, Agent Orange, Vietnam 1961 to the present. It came home with us, now our children and grandchildren. As you see the two children there that are deformed, those children are born in Vietnam in areas that were heavily sprayed by Agent Orange. And there's the American soldier who was sprayed by Agent Orange. Not only is the Agent Orange and the other agents blue, white, pink, black, all those were not war crime stuff because they were defoliants. That's how they got by with not being called war crimes by using chemical warfare. It was considered defoliants because it killed the plants and not the people. Well, it's killing the people. Not only is it killing the American soldier, but it's killing our grandchildren and our children are being born with the deformities like those there. So Agent Orange keeps on giving. Okay. And then we've had the show on before, the bile duct cancer, chloriorangia, whatever the doctor said it was, okay, a liver fluke. That is the fluke that while you were in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, or Korea, if you ate pickled fish, shrimp, or fish that were not fully cooked or raw, there's a good chance that you may have this fluke or parasite in your system, which has laid dormant for all these years and is now causing bowel cancer. I'm not going to go into this a whole lot. I would recommend that you go back and look at the show that we did on this with the doctor, and her name just totally went right out of my mind.
Just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so it was just a little while ago, but go back and look at the information about the fluke. If you in Korea, if you were in Korea 6 months ago, you didn't have to be back doing Vietnam. That's going now. If you go back if you're going over to Korea right now, be careful what you eat. Okay. 4 out of 5 Vietnam veterans report recent symptoms of PTSD 20, 25 years after Vietnam. A lot of us came home and got busy making a life, and now we're getting old and slowing down and retiring, and now we got time on our hands, and problem with time on our hands, we start having thoughts. Those thoughts of Vietnam come back. So today, a lot of us seasoned senior citizens are struggling with post-traumatic stress or depression due to what we did and experienced 50-some years ago. Did you know that people with post-traumatic stress go through severe bouts of feeling lethargic? People with post-traumatic stress live in a chronic state of stress because the stress cycle rarely, if ever, gets back to the normal rhythm. The afflicted person holds on to more crisis energy than the brain is designed to handle. This process brings about full body fatigue that can be hard for an individual to describe. As State Department from Foreign Services Officer Norman Hanna, author of The Key to Failure, Madison books, and one of the most insightful critics of the war, observed, this is the tragedy of Vietnam. Vietnam, we were fighting for time rather than space, and we ran out of time. Remember, we were not fighting for land and move forward. We were fighting for time for the Vietnamese, South Vietnamese to build up and get strong, and we ran out of time. It's like when the football team gets out there and they get behind, they're ahead first half, and the second half they get behind. Well, if they go ahead, could add another 15 minutes of playing time, they might catch back up again. But they ran out of time. Again, if we treated the Vietnamese so bad, if the American military treated the Vietnamese people so bad, why did they risk their lives coming to America? Why were we pushing $1 million helicopters over the side so the Vietnamese could come over to America? You know, America where the soldiers treated them so bad. With a sign there that says, God bless America and God bless us too. A grunt. That's what a grunt looks like. Thank you for tuning in. Our next show will be the 9th of October. And don't know what the subject is going to be yet. I'm talking to a couple of guests and so forth. Before I mention, speaking of Factory History Group, the Vietnam Veterans Factory History will be holding a seminar in Atlanta on November 2nd. It's free of charge. I'll give you some more information in the next show. I'm going to be there myself because these guys don't know anything but put out the truth. Also, I want you to think about me this coming Sunday. I'll become 3/4 of a century old. My birthday is, I'll be 75. Birthday. I'll be 75. I never thought I'd make it that far. 5th of October is the monthly POW ceremony at the State Capitol in Raleigh at 12 o'clock noon. Look forward to seeing you next show. I hope I've given you an idea of what it was like to be in Vietnam. I hope I didn't gross you out too much. I had pictures of crotch rots, but then I said, well, maybe that might be a little bit much for some people. So I left those pictures out. I do try to keep it good. Good night and God bless, and I'll see you next time.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.